then technology transfer plan, then technology transfer report. This report that will consist of different batches, effective factors in the technology transfer, what are these, and unsuccessful technology transfer processes, what are the reason for the same. Now, as far as the documentation is concerned, why it is important? Because if you are documenting, that means you had done it, and if you had not documented, that means you had not done it. Now, as far as the documentation part is concerned, what are the different documents that are required during technology transfer? These are these are related with the confidentiality, these are related with the licensing, these are related with the selling or assigning the rights in the sense that the intellectual property rights, and to give the licensing IP rights. Then some of the MOUs, that is memorandum of understandings, and some of the legal issues, and last but not the least, that is the references. Now, as far as the technology transfer documentation is concerned, generally it is interpreted as document indicating contents of technology transfer for transferring and transferred parties. That means sending and the receiving parties. Each step from research and development to production. It is the duty of the quality assurance department to check and approve the documentation for all processes of technology transfer. Now, in that, the first is the development report. Now, as far as the development report is concerned, the research and development report is a file of technical development, and research and development department is in charge of its documentation. This report is an important file to indicate rationale for the quality design of drug substances. And it can be used at the pre-approval and inspection as valid document for quality design of new drug. The development report contains the data of pharmaceutical development of new drug, substances and drug products at stages from early development phase to final application of approval, information of raw material and components, design of manufacturing methods, change in historic of important processes and control. The second is the technology transfer plan. Now, as far as the technology transfer plan is concerned, it is to describe the items and contents of technology to be transferred and detailed procedures of individual transfer and transfer schedule, establish judgment, criteria for completion, and technology transfer concerning individual technology to be transferred. It is duty of quality assurance department to check and approve the documentation for all processes of technology transfer. The third is the technology transfer report. Now here the research and development report is a file of technical development, and research and development department is in charge of its documentation. This report is an important file to indicate rationale for the quality design of drug substances and its specifications and test methods. The development report is not prerequisite for the application. For approval, it can be used at the pre-approval and inspection as valid document. For quality design of new drug, the development reports that it will contain the data of pharmaceutical development of new drug, substances and drug products at stages from early development phase to the final application of approval, then the information of raw material and components, then design of manufacturing methods, change in histories of important processes and control, the parameters, specifications and test methods of drug substances, the validity of specification range. The technology transfer plan is to describe items and contents of technology to be transferred and detailed procedures of individual transfer and transfer schedule that will establish the judgment criteria for the completion of the transfer. The transferring party should prepare the plan before the implementation of the transfer and reach an agreement on its content with the transferred party. The technology transfer report that it will tells the completion of technology transfer is to be made. Once the data are taken accordingly to the technology plan and are evaluated to confirm that the predetermined judgment criteria that are met, both transferring and the transferred party, that is sending and the receiving units, they should document the technology transfer reports. Then the exhibit batches. After taking scale-up batches of the product, manufacturing of exhibit batches takes place. In case of exhibit, batch sizes are important along with equipment and their processes. This is done for filing purposes in regulatory agencies. The purpose behind to run 3 consecutive batches to show process consistency, reproducibility, and to demonstrate that the manufacturing processes is under control throughout all the stages. Then the effective factors in the technology transfer. Technology transfer can be considered successful if a receiving unit can routinely reproduce the transferred product, process, or methods against a predetermined set of specifications as agreed with the sending unit and or a development unit. Main factors that affect the process of technology transfer in pharmaceutical industry, these are: first is the investment in research and development, second is the establishment relationship between production and research, third is the training of individual in relation to technology, fourth is the information development in the field of technology transfer methods, fifth is the organizational equipment and informational infrastructure, and sixth is the employment of international specialists in the field of technology and creation of appropriate relationship between recipient and the sending technology. Awareness of fundamental and important factors, these are required for the technology transfer. Last is the consideration of existing and old technologies along with the degree of development and improvement of the technology on the basis of the internal resources. Next is the unsuccessful technology transfer process, that may be why it remain unsuccessful. The reason might be unsuccessful or the incomplete process validation. The reason might be high rate of batch rejection, excessive labor requirement, increased cost of the product, incomplete documentation, and product does not show specifications as intended. Sometimes it might be the delayed regulatory approvals and or product launch. So as we had seen that there are different reasons for the unsuccessful technology, and one of the reason that is said to be the documented improper documentation. So if we are maintaining the document, that means we had done something. If we are not maintaining the document, that means not done something. So no document, that means work is not done. And if the documents are there, that means the work is done. So as far as the documentation part is concerned, there are different documents like say the confidentiality agreement, licensing, then memorandum of understanding, and some of the legal issues. Now, as far as the confidentiality documents are concerned, the technology transfer that will require a documented, designated designed progress using skilled and knowledgeable personnel working inside a quality system. So with documentation of data, casing all aspects of technology transfer processes was challenging, and transferees often lack the skills to deal with it effectively. So in order to develop future, there is a rising alertness that an appropriate transfer of manufacturing technology transfer is essential to promote the drug quality as designed during R&D to be a final product during manufacture, as well as assure the stable quality transfer for many reasons between contract giver and the contract acceptor during the manufacture. So documentation that will provide a support and proof that all the technology has been transferred neatly and in a well-defined manner. So it will ensure that every aspect has been covered. It should contain a brief summary of scope and parameters applied at receiving unit and sending unit, with the conclusion that hold up technology transfer. Next is the confidentiality agreement. Now here a confidentiality agreement, that is which is also known as a non-disclosure agreement. Confidentiality document, it is also called as non-disclosure agreement, or sometimes it is simply referred as NDA, non-disclosure agreement. It is simply a contract between two or more parties where the subject of the agreement is a promise that information conveyed will be maintained in secrecy. So that is the duty of both receiving as well as the sending unit. These agreements can be mutually agreement where both parties are obligated to maintain secrecy, or they can be unilateral agreement. Unilateral agreement, that means from only one side. Bilateral, that is from the two sides. That means sending as well as receiving unit, they both has the responsibility, the same equally divided responsibility. If it is unilateral, that means before receiving any kind of particular technology, 26, before receiving any kind of technology, there is a need, there is a duty, there is a responsibility of the sending unit, and once it has been transferred, that is the responsibility of the receiving unit, that is the unilateral, where only receiving party that will becomes obligated to maintain the secrecy. Now, mutual agreements, mutual confidentiality agreement, these are useful when both parties will be conveying the confidential information, such as for the inventor group. Some standard unilateral confidentiality agreements, which are possibly most common in the innovation arena, are used when only one party is turning over confidential information. This is already I explained it to you. Perhaps to a potential investor or prospective licenses. Now, indeed, you can use a non-disclosure agreement to protect any type of information that is not generally known, and the use of confidentiality agreement. That means that those who receive the information are obligated to maintain the information in its secrecy, while legally prohibit that the disclosure subject to an agreement from being a general disclosure that would defeat the trade secret. Next is the licensing. Now, licenses, they will allow the patent owners to share invention or other intellectual property in a controlled manner and to receive revenues. The revenue might be in the form of the royalties. The revenues that might be in the form of the royalties or other benefits, like say for example access to the another firm's knowledge. Now, a public research organization may not be in a position to undertake the direct exploitation of the IP rights. Accordingly, assuming that the entity owns the intellectual property, in order to exploit the financial potential of an invention fully, it can consider finding an appropriate licensee for the intellectual property. Now, licensing is an important phenomenon of technology transfer that has been gained momentum in pharmaceutical industry, by which pharmaceutical companies can contribute to research and development. Technology transfer is a complex issue and should be dealt with using holistic approach. Now, there are two chief legal vehicles by which owners may commercialize their intellectual property. The first one is to sell or assign the IP, and the second is to license the IP rights. So, when rights are assigned other than partially, the recipient or assignee that will require the ownership of all rights which previously belonged to the assigner, although the may take a license back from the assignee. Third is the MOUs, that is the Memorandum of Understandings. MOU, that will stand for the Memorandum of Understandings. These are also called as commitment letter. These are also called as the letter of intent, MOUs. Now, when this is to be used, this is to be used generally when there is an official start of a license negotiation. Sometimes if we have to show the serious intention to sign license deal with the other party, motivating the speeding up process to reach the license deal, sometime to indicate this period of time within which agreement is to be concluded, and usually it is non-binding document through the legal obligation that may arises. So this will indicate the binding and the non-binding status, that is the MOUs. So binding by default if not indicated otherwise in some countries. There are some of the legal issues. Now, what these legal issues are? The legal issues that might be associated with the understanding of the institutional framework, that might be commercial strategy and the law, that might be the organizational and the support advisors. The right mix between the flexibility and the protection. So all these are required when we have to move from one location to that of the another location during the process of technology transfer, during the process of shifting from one place to that of the another. So we should have the documents. These are associated with the development report. These are associated with the technology transfer plan. These are associated with the technology transfer report. These are associated with some of the factors that are useful in case of the effective transfer. And if the technology transfer that is not occurring successfully, then what might be the reason? And after all, the documentation, that means it will act as a full proof of done something. And the list of the documents that are very commonly required are the confidentiality document, licensing, MOUs, and the legal issues. Now, in order to understand all these, so we had these kinds of the references. So I request you all that you should go through all these in order to get further details associated with the documentation part of the technology transfer processes. So today we will stop at this particular point only, and here particular the unit 2, that is the technology transfer, that is over.